Okay, so the plan that I reviewed was the Coots Escarpment System and Land Management Strategy Review for a relatively new park that is existing within the Hamilton and Burlington greater areas. So some history and background on the areas. The Coots Park System is an area that encompasses 27 parks owned by the Royal Botanical Gardens and other public entities. So it's a really unique park system in that it actually encompasses both crown and provincial lands, but also private entities that operate underneath the guise of natural reserves. And it also exists itself between the areas of Hamilton Harbor, Shadoke, Upper Escarpment, and Rock Chapel near the Waterdown and Flamborough areas, and along the Bruce Trail all the way towards Burlington Heights and outer Oakville. Um, the system itself encompasses 1,560 hectares of natural and recreation purpose space, and only system within the Niagara Escarpment not interrupted by the 400 series highway. So it's a unique park system in that each subsection that we'll get to later is not interrupted by any major highway. And this is a major factor for the park in preserving exactly what the natural reserve or what the space is intended to do. Park system itself also exists from glacial erosion, like most of the Niagara Escarpment, and has created this area that the park exists in itself, and has also created this really unique microclimate because of the limestone outcroppings forming around like a southerly coordination. It creates this more temperate atmosphere and can actually sustain rare types of birds, mammals, amphibians that you can't otherwise interact with along other parts of the Niagara Escarpment. The park system actually encompasses 6 other heritage land sites. So the greater park system is broken up into these 6 systems, so that the Coots Paradise Boars Rock Chapel system, the Clapson's Grindstone Heritage System, the Waterdown Sassafras Woods Park System, and Lower Grindstone Park System, and finally the Burlington Heights Park System that we will talk about later. So some further background, these heritage land sites are established from historical towns and also from main bodies of water that they are around. A lot of these areas have been the site of Aboriginal inhabitation and nomadic living. And during the colonial period, a lot of this space was used for small scale lumber milling and other trading routes. And then of more recent history, it's been noted that the main municipalities that this park system encompasses, which is Dundas and Waterdown within the Hamilton area, are the two fastest growing wards. So some classification, the Coots Park System is a conservation-oriented natural land, and that's for several reasons, historical, legally, and practical. And one of the big reasons for this is historically, the founder of this movement is Thomas McQueenston, and he was a politician in the area and really enjoyed birding and just interacting with the natural environment. So he saw the value in the land and saw the expansion happening in Hamilton and saw the need to actually um, preserve it. So he went and petitioned the Ontario government to make it a game area so that they could use it for hunting. And then several years later, this became the botanical gardens of today. Legally, some of the park systems lie within UNESCO biosphere and private properties, and this inherently positions the space away from preservation and into conservation. It's a designation that UNESCO has and the park system has to adhere to, but also private lands you cannot preserve unless you have ownership over them. So this is a contrast to many parklands that in Ontario are surrounded by crown lands and can easily be expanded and be designated for whatever purpose. So some recreational opportunities. There's a heavy emphasis in this park system for hiking. The closer you get to McMaster University and the Coots Paradise Boars and Rock Chapel Heritage Land, there's a heavy emphasis on hiking and education. So in the summer, there's a lot of camps that go into Coots Paradise Marsh and Coots Paradise Landing to do educational environmental programs and to do some further research for the university. The trail systems in Waterdown and Sassafras Woods heritage land has emphasis on hiking, like most of the heritage lands, but also a burgeoning interest in mountain biking, and that's one of the designations of the plan going forward was to engage these markets of mountain bikers and to develop a more systematic approach for developing trails. And some future considerations the plan outlined was to develop non-motorized watercraft recreation opportunities in the Grindstone Creek area, such as canoeing and sailing. And here are some examples of the park systems. So for management objectives, we're going to be looking at the Burlington Heights Land Management Plan, and these objectives are specific to that territory within the greater Coutts Paradise Park Systems Plan. And the objectives outlined by this are into four main areas, which are natural reserve, historical, natural, and access. The natural reserve being the rehabilitation of sites and the emphasis on keeping those environments preserved. Historical, focusing on the actual built environments and historical significant sites and keeping those preserved for that use. Natural being setting apart some hiking trails and guided tours to provide recreation opportunities and further education. And access, just ensuring that there is increased support for the burgeoning population and more routes from the 403 that splits Burlington and Hamilton. So these are just some pictures of the objectives themselves. So this is the natural reserve, and to the top of the page you see a body of water, and that's the Hamilton Harbor. To the bottom of the page, that's the Coutts Paradise Marsh, and the main road in between is the 403. That's the historical, that's the natural, and that's the access objective. So carrying capacity for the park system, it's actually a very interesting omission from the plan and land management strategy itself, just because there isn't a lot of usage data given on the site, and there hasn't been a lot of usage data taken on the site, but there is a lot of demographic data for the site, and in particular, Burlington Heights being in between Hamilton and Burlington, there's a high traffic area, and again, like the total population of the area being 900,000 people, expected to grow to 1.4 million people by 2031. There are a lot of carrying capacity competencies that will need to be taken into consideration. So with the Coutts Paradise Park Systems having a lot of distinctions and considerations for individual sites, there's also a need for individual carrying capacity considerations for sites within the actual heritage lands. And some of the main carrying capacities considered were physical capacity, ecological capacity, and social carrying capacity. So physical capacity, again, given that Burlington Heights is between these two major areas, there are some implications of rehabilitation and research and general recreation. So designating within this site some areas that have been negatively impacted and preserving that, but also opening trails for general public just to engage them further and making sure that they are being engaged on a level that does not further degrade the environment. Ecologically, the capacity of the Burlington Heights is somewhat unique and fragile just because of its proximity to Hamilton Harbor and years of pollution from that area. And because of that, some of the sites near the water need to be restrictive and off limits. Social capacity is something that needs to be taken into consideration just because of, again, the volume of people in the space and the amount of people that will be in the space during like a summer season often hinders the intimate settings and the natural environment. So some direct and indirect and synergistic impacts of Burlington Heights. So some direct impacts are mountain bikers as well as major waste from Hamilton Harbor, just because of the immediate impact it has on trails and the developing of trails in the case of mountain biking. The indirect impacts, so is mostly just a compilation of direct factors that causes negative byproducts such as trail erosion and waterfront closures because of waste. And synergistic impacts would be mostly contained to like trail washouts, so a lot of snow removal from main trails, causing soil erosion and trail erosion just because of improper melting. So some management procedures currently, it seems that the plan adheres to a visitor experience resource protection framework with a heavy emphasis on community engagement, engaging stakeholders. But given new parks orientation, I think for my plan and framework, it would be um, heavy on the visitor activity management protocol just because there's a need for new programming and for new specific uh, area programming, and just that we can engage the public in educational, recreational, and preservational activities. And this is especially evident in Burlington Heights, where we have all three of these present. So monitoring my management procedures are very important. So again, for demonstrated use, we need surveys, trail registration audits of trail systems and trail signage, just to ensure quality of the trails and ensure that we are programming properly for the people coming to the site. And that kind of flows into the environment and social capacity positioning, which is designated the trails for given expertise, especially with mountain biking having different expertise levels, and rental registration for canoes and the waterfront, opening up that market and maybe taking off a lot of the pressure it puts on the actual mainland park system, and rehabilitation with intent of use. And this is a big thing with the park system at Burlington Heights, that with the population set to expand and grow rapidly in the next 20 years, every site that's being preserved needs to be like doing so that it can be used in the future, and that it can be sustainably used in the future without harm to the environment. Some direct and indirect. So my most significant management process, I think, would be the reviewing of the Cootes Park System land management strategy. The most significant management process was the holistic approach and its creation to include historical, natural, and accessibility objectives, as well as partnerships in their land management. And this, I felt like, just instilled like a sense of proficiency, and like a proficiency that obviously accounted for differing dimensions of the social, ecological, and physical carrying capacities. And again, just like a better grasp on usage and sustainable development. And just to highlight like how unique this plan is, with so much of the plan emphasized on the natural environment and natural competencies, but also like the historical and partnerships, administration, regulations, funding, and how individualistic it is for each site, and how again site specific it is for their actual requirements. So here are my links to the plans discussed, my references, and the media. Thank you.